The dust storm came without warning, like the planet itself had decided to scream. Mara Velrix pulled her children closer as the red wind howled across the empty plain. Her thin cloak snapped and tore. Her youngest cried weakly, no tears left in his eyes. The twins leaned against her legs, too tired to speak. Once people bowed when she walked. Once her name opened doors across 3 star systems. Now she was kneeling in the dirt, holding a broken scanner and praying to a universe that had already taken everything. Mara Velrix had been rich, powerful, the wife of a trade baron. Her towers floated above cities. Her children had tutors, gardens, and clean air. Then the baron lost a war he should never have started. When his enemies came, they did not kill her. They did worse. They took everything, the accounts, the ships, the protection. Then they burned a message into her memory and into the metal collar still locked around her neck. The baron never forgives. He had abandoned her to save himself. Now she was an outlaw on a backwater human world, walking across ranch land that stretched farther than her old empire ever had. Her ship was gone, her credits worthless, her pride already dead. The storm knocked her flat. She shielded the children with her body. Grit filled her mouth. Her muscles shook from hunger and fear. She knew this was where people disappeared. No cameras, no patrols, no mercy. A low rumble cut through the storm. At first, she thought it was thunder. Then the sound grew closer, steady, mechanical, human. Headlights pierced the red dust like 2 small suns. A truck. It rolled to a stop only a few meters away. The engine stayed on. A door opened. Boots hit the ground. A human man stepped out. He was not tall, not armored, no weapons visible. He wore worn jeans, a brown jacket, and a wide hat pulled low against the storm. His face was rough, lined by sun and years of quiet work. His eyes were sharp but tired. He looked at Myra, at the children, at the collar. He swore softly under his breath. Mara forced herself to stand. She lifted her hands, weak and shaking, in a sign of peace used across the stars. "Please," she said, her voice cracked and hoarse. "I can work, I can repay my children." The man interrupted her. "Get in my truck right now." She froze. Her people negotiated, they assessed, they calculated. This was too fast, too direct. She started. He took one step closer. His voice was calm, but there was iron under it. "That storm will peel skin in 10 minutes. Your kids won't last 5. Get in the truck." One of the twins collapsed. The older one tried to lift her and failed. Mara made her choice. She grabbed her children and stumbled forward. The man opened the back door and lifted the kids like they weighed nothing. He wrapped them in thick blankets and shoved water bottles into their hands. Mara climbed into the passenger seat, shaking uncontrollably. The door slammed shut. The storm faded to a distant roar as the truck moved. Warm air filled the cabin. The children drank greedily. One laughed weakly, the sound shocking in its softness. Mara stared straight ahead, waiting for the next cruelty. Humans were known for their kindness, but also their anger. She had heard stories, good deeds followed by terrible prices. The man drove in silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. "My name's Eli Carter," he said. "I run cattle out here, ain't much, but it's home." She swallowed. "I am Mara Velrix." He nodded once, like the name meant nothing. "You hungry?" "Yes," she whispered. He handed her a wrapped food bar without looking. "Eat slow." Tears ran down her face as she did. After a long pause, she asked the question burning in her chest. "Why are you helping us?" Eli kept his eyes on the road. "Because you needed help," he said simply. Outside, the storm raged. Inside the truck, for the first time in years, Mara Velrix felt something dangerous and unfamiliar. Hope the wind swept across the dry fields as Jonah drove his old truck down the winding dirt road. The sun had just begun to dip behind the distant hills, casting long shadows that stretched across the golden grass. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the open window, feeling the cool evening air brush against his skin. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had just witnessed. Marla, the alien woman with pale green skin and bright silver eyes, had been standing on the edge of the highway with her 3 children, looking lost and scared. She had been crying quietly when he had pulled over, and the sign she carried, "We lost," cut straight through him. Jonah had been a simple man all his life. His ranch was small, not fancy, but it was honest work. He knew hardship and he knew people who had suffered. He had never met anyone like Marla before, someone who had been rich and powerful and now stood there with nothing. Yet, as he looked at her and her children, something in him stirred. He felt a strong urge to help. Without thinking, he had said the words that changed everything. "Get in my truck right now." As they climbed into the back of the truck, Marla's children clung to her tightly. Jonah could see the fear in their eyes, but he also saw relief. They had been on the road for days, hiding from mercenaries who wanted to seize whatever was left of their wealth, and now they were safe, at least for tonight. Jonah started the engine, and the truck rumbled to life, carrying them away from the danger. Marla kept glancing at him, her eyes full of questions, but she said nothing. The first miles were quiet. The children whispered to each other softly, and Marla stared out of the window, tears still glistening on her cheeks. Jonah didn't press her to talk. He knew some things couldn't be forced. Instead, he drove through the quiet countryside, past fields of waving wheat and over small creeks where the water sparkled like glass. The smell of the earth after a long, dry season filled the air, grounding him, reminding him of home. After a while, Marla spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me. Why are you helping us?" Jonah glanced at her, keeping his eyes on the road. He shrugged. "I've seen people lose everything before," he said simply, "and I know what it feels like. Everyone deserves a chance to start over." Marla blinked, not sure what to say. Her pride had been stripped away, but she felt something she hadn't in a long time, hope. They stopped at a small diner along the way. Jonah bought them burgers and fries, letting the children eat first while Marla stared at the plate in front of her. She had always been used to lavish meals, but tonight, simple food tasted extraordinary. The laughter of her children, small and tentative, filled the air and brought warmth to her chest. Jonah watched them with a quiet smile, remembering his own childhood and the times he had felt afraid but safe under the wings of his parents. He wanted to give them that same feeling now. As night fell, Jonah led them to his ranch. The place was modest, an old wooden house with peeling paint and a barn that smelled of hay and horses, but it felt alive, warm, and welcoming. Marla's children ran to the small corral to see the animals, squealing with delight as they petted the horses and chickens. Marla lingered by the porch, her eyes scanning the horizon. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and yet strangely at peace. She had been running for so long, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. Jonah placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're safe here," he said softly. "We'll get through this together." Marla looked into his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. It was more than gratitude, it was recognition, human kindness. Something she had never expected to encounter, especially in a galaxy filled with treachery and betrayal. She wanted to believe in it, wanted to believe in people again. That night they sat around a small fire outside the house. The children were sleepy, leaning against Marla as she wrapped a blanket around them. Jonah handed her a cup of hot tea, and they drank in silence. The stars above stretched endlessly, and for the first time Marla felt like she belonged somewhere, not because of wealth or status, but because someone had chosen to care without asking for anything in return. And in that quiet, simple moment, Marla realized that sometimes the most extraordinary things in life weren't power or riches. They were the moments when someone saw you as human, worthy, and capable of starting again the next morning. The ranch was alive with movement. Jonah had already fed the animals and was mending a fence when Marla stepped out of the house, her children trailing behind her like little shadows. She had slept poorly, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes. She wanted to do something, anything, to repay Jonah for his kindness, though she knew she had nothing to give in the way she once had. She had been used to commanding wealth, resources, even armies, but here, in this simple human world, her power meant nothing. Only her actions mattered. "I can help," she said quietly, almost to herself, but Jonah heard her. He looked up from the fence, raising an eyebrow. "Help with what?" he asked. Marla hesitated. "With the ranch, with your work," she said. "I know I don't know much about farming, but I can learn. I have to do something." Jonah nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He respected people who tried, even if they stumbled. "All right," he said simply. "You can start with feeding the chickens." The day was long, and Marla's hands were clumsy at first. She dropped eggs, tripped over the hay, and nearly startled the horses into running. The children laughed nervously, hiding behind her legs, but Jonah stayed patient. He showed her how to carry water, how to check the fences, how to ride the tractor. With each instruction, Marla felt a strange pride in her muscles aching and her hands getting dirty. This was honest work. No wealth could compare to the satisfaction she felt in learning and contributing. As the sun rose higher, a distant sound broke the calm of the ranch. The children froze and Marla's heart skipped a beat. It was a low hum of engines, far away but getting closer. Jonah stiffened, gripping a wrench in his hand. "Stay inside," he said, voice steady but tense. Marla followed him, ushering the children into the house. They peered through the windows as a convoy of armored vehicles appeared on the horizon. Her stomach twisted in fear. These were the mercenaries, the ones who had taken everything from her, the ones who wouldn't stop until they had her family and any remaining valuables. Jonah stepped outside again, squinting at the approaching convoy. He muttered under his breath, then turned to Marla. "We have to be smart. You stay here with the kids. I'll handle them." Marla shook her head, panic rising. "No, I can't just sit here," she exclaimed. Jonah's eyes softened. "You've done enough already. Trust me." Marla wanted to argue to take control, but deep down she knew he was right. For once, she had to let someone else protect her. The convoy drew nearer, and Jonah climbed onto a haystack, waving his arms. He shouted in a voice that was surprisingly commanding, carrying across the open fields. The mercenaries slowed, confused by the sudden human presence. Jonah wasn't armed with lasers or plasma rifles, just his wits and his knowledge of the land. He maneuvered them carefully, using the terrain to his advantage, leading them away from the house, giving Marla and the children precious minutes. Inside the house, Marla held her children close, her heart pounding. She watched Jonah through the window, amazed at his courage. He wasn't perfect. He was human, limited, vulnerable, but he was brave. He faced danger to protect strangers, and she felt a surge of admiration she hadn't expected. She realized then that humans had something different, something raw, something unyielding. Courage didn't come from wealth or power, it came from heart. Hours later, the convoy had been lured away, trapped in a narrow canyon Jonah had known since childhood. He returned to the ranch, dusty and worn but smiling. Marla ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered. Jonah shrugged, brushing dirt from his shirt. "We saved each other," he said. Marla looked at him, seeing not just a modest rancher, but a hero. That evening, as the sun set in shades of red and gold, Marla sat with her children outside the house. They were safe, at least for now, and she realized something profound. She had lost her riches, her status, everything she once thought defined her. But here, in this simple place, she had found something more valuable: trust, safety, and the extraordinary courage of a human being willing to risk everything for strangers. She turned to Jonah, who was repairing the fence, and felt a deep respect swell in her chest. He had shown her what humanity could be at its best: kind, brave, and selfless. And she knew, no matter what the future held, she wanted to learn from him, to understand this strength that humans carried in their hearts. For the first time, she didn't want her old life back. She wanted to live in this world of courage and kindness, and perhaps one day she could give it back. The morning came quiet, with a soft light spilling over the hills. Marla woke before her children, sitting on the porch with her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. She watched Jonah move around the ranch, his hands steady as he fed the animals and checked the fences. She felt a strange calm, yet beneath it, a restless worry. Danger had not disappeared. The mercenaries would return if they discovered the convoy had failed, and she knew they would be relentless. Still, she refused to show fear in front of her children. "I want to help more," she said suddenly, her voice firm. Jonah looked up from the barn door he was fixing. He raised an eyebrow. "More than yesterday?" he asked. Marla nodded. "I want to learn how to protect them, how to protect us." Jonah studied her for a moment, then sighed. "It's not just about strength," he said. "It's about thinking, being smart, and trusting your instincts." He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "I'll teach you what I can. It won't be easy." Marla smiled faintly. For the first time, she felt that she could do something useful, not just survive, but contribute. The day was spent in lessons. Jonah showed her how to move quietly across the fields, how to listen for danger in the wind, how to recognize signs of trouble long before it arrived. Marla's alien senses were sharp, and she learned quickly. She moved with grace, her children watching her in awe. Even the smallest things, like hiding behind a haystack or signaling silently, became exercises in courage. She began to feel a strength she hadn't known she possessed, one not granted by wealth or status, but by effort and care. As the sun climbed high, a shadow fell over the ranch. Marla froze, Jonah tensed. In the distance, a small ship hovered above the horizon, too fast for a human eye to track easily. The mercenaries were back, and this time they had not come alone. Jonah grabbed his rifle and motioned for Marla and the children to follow him inside. The children clung to her, trembling, and she felt a deep surge of protectiveness. She could not let them see her afraid. She could not let them lose hope. Inside the house, Jonah and Marla worked quickly. He barricaded the doors and windows with spare boards while Marla held the children, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself. Her heart pounded, but she remembered what Jonah had taught her, thinking first, moving carefully. She scanned the room for anything she could use to help, anything that might give them a chance. Her eyes fell on a toolbox. She grabbed it, feeling the weight, and held it like a weapon. For the first time, she realized that courage was not about fearlessness. It was about action despite fear. The ship landed roughly in the field. Men in armored suits spilled out, weapons raised. Jonah stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This land is mine, leave and no one gets hurt." The leader of the mercenaries laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You think a human can stop us?" he sneered. Marla stepped beside Jonah, holding the toolbox like a shield. The mercenaries paused, surprised by her presence. She met their eyes steadily, and for the first time she felt the raw power of human courage. It was not strength, it was defiance. It was the refusal to surrender. The standoff seemed to stretch forever. Jonah's finger hovered over the rifle, his stance confident. Marla could feel the tension crackling in the air. Then slowly she raised her voice, speaking clearly and firmly in the alien tongue, demanding they leave. The mercenaries blinked, startled. She had learned quickly. Her voice, combined with Jonah's calm authority, created something they had not expected, unyielding determination. The mercenaries retreated, realizing that this small human rancher and his strange alien ally were not to be underestimated. When the danger passed, Marla sank to the ground, breathing heavily. Jonah sat beside her, putting a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said simply. "Better than well, you surprised me." She looked at him, tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of understanding. She had been broken, but here on this humble ranch, she was learning to rebuild, not with wealth or power, but with courage, hope, and human kindness. As evening fell, the children ran to her, hugging tightly. She hugged them back, feeling a new kind of pride. She had protected them just as Jonah had promised. She had learned that being human, or embracing the courage humans could inspire, was not about perfection, but heart. And for the first time in her life, she felt she belonged somewhere, not because of what she had, but because of who she was becoming the morning after the mercenaries left. The ranch was quiet, but Marla felt restless. She had spent the night thinking about what had happened, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline. The children slept peacefully, exhausted from the previous day's tension, and Jonah moved about the farm as if nothing had happened. She watched him from the porch, noticing the way he handled the animals, repaired fences, and moved through the land with an ease she envied. He had a strength she had never seen in anyone, not even in her former life of wealth and influence. It wasn't the strength of armies or money. It was the strength of heart and courage. "Marla," Jonah said, breaking her thoughts. He was carrying a bucket of water from the well, his sleeves rolled up, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Come help me with the irrigation. We need the fields ready for planting." She nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. Every day here she learned something new, not just about work, but about herself. She had once thought that her identity depended on status, wealth, and the fear she could inspire. Now she realized that her worth came from action, care, and courage. She had a long way to go, but she wanted to try. As they worked side by side, Jonah spoke about the land, the seasons, and how life in simple human terms could be hard but rewarding. Marla listened, soaking in every word. She asked questions about soil, water, and planting schedules, and Jonah answered patiently. The children played nearby, occasionally running over to show her a flower or a baby chick. Marla laughed, a sound she hadn't heard in a long time. For a brief moment, the horrors of her past seemed distant, replaced by a simple rhythm of work and care, of laughter and learning. But peace never lasted long. Just as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, a distant noise reached their ears, engines, shouting, movement. Marla's heart sank. Jonah tensed immediately, scanning the horizon. It was another group of mercenaries. This time they had brought drones and weapons designed to hunt and capture. Marla grabbed the children, holding them close. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she remembered Jonah's lessons. She squared her shoulders, feeling a fire inside her that hadn't existed yesterday. She would not run blindly. She would not let fear control her. Jonah quickly assessed the situation, pointing out high ground and natural cover. He instructed Marla to take the children into the barn and stay low. Marla obeyed, her hands shaking but steadying as she whispered instructions to the children. She realized that she had become the protector they needed. She had no weapons like the mercenaries, but she had courage, resourcefulness, and determination. For the first time, she understood that power was not something you were given. It was something you chose to wield, even when terrified. The mercenaries advanced, and Jonah moved with precision, using traps and clever misdirection. Marla watched through a small window as he drew them away from the house and fields, his confidence giving her hope. She held her breath as the children peeked around her, wide-eyed. "You can do this," she whispered to them, though part of her whispered the same to herself. They were small humans, but their spirit was strong, and it reminded her that life was worth defending, no matter the cost. After what felt like hours, the mercenaries retreated again, outsmarted and frustrated. Jonah returned, dusty and scratched, but alive. Marla ran to him, hugging him tightly. I don't know how you do it," she said, tears running down her face. Jonah shook his head, smiling faintly. "I don't do it alone," he said. "You're learning fast, you're stronger than you think." Marla looked at him, truly seeing him not just as a rancher, but as a human capable of inspiring bravery in those around him. That evening, Marla sat outside with her children, watching the sun sink behind the hills. She held them close, feeling a warmth she had not known in years. She realized that she had been wealthy, powerful, and feared, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was courage, trust, and love, the simple human qualities Jonah had shown her. She had survived because of him, but she had begun to live because she was willing to try. As stars filled the night sky, Marla whispered softly to herself, "I will protect them, I will be strong." She looked at Jonah repairing the fence under the moonlight and felt a surge of admiration and hope. Maybe she had lost everything, but she had found something greater, the heart of humanity and the courage to face whatever came next. For the first time, she believed in herself, and in the people who could make her believe again the next morning. The ranch was calm, but Marla could feel the tension lingering like a shadow. She had learned a lot from Jonah, but the fear of the mercenaries' return was never far from her mind. The children were cheerful, chasing each other across the fields, but she watched them carefully, ready to protect them at a moment's notice. She had never felt such responsibility before. Once her life had been about power and comfort, about delegating danger to others. Now every decision, every movement mattered because the lives of these small humans depended on her courage. Jonah noticed her unease. "You're thinking too much," he said quietly as he handed her a bucket of water. She shook her head. "I can't help it," she admitted. "We have no idea when they'll come back or how strong they'll be." Jonah smiled faintly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we prepare," he said. "We use what we have, we trust each other. Fear doesn't win here." Marla looked at him, realizing that his calm confidence was not born of ignorance. It was born of understanding life, knowing risk, and choosing action over panic. She wanted to be like him. They spent the day fortifying the ranch. Jonah showed Marla how to set traps, hide supplies, and create escape routes for the children. Marla watched him closely, her mind absorbing everything. She moved with purpose, her hands learning the feel of ropes, tools, and even the earth itself. The physical labor exhausted her, but it also thrilled her. She had never felt so alive. In this simple world, she discovered a strength that no wealth could have ever given her. Each small achievement, each lesson learned, was a victory she could feel in her bones. As the sun dipped low, a strange calm settled over the ranch. Marla stood on the porch, watching the golden light spill over the fields. The children were inside, playing quietly, and Jonah was fixing the barn door. She realized that despite all the danger, despite the fear, she felt hope, a fragile, brilliant hope. It was strange for her, this feeling, because she had always relied on money and influence to solve problems. Now she relied on courage, strategy, and trust. She was learning what it truly meant to survive and to live. Then a sudden sound shattered the quiet, engines roaring in the distance, faster than before. Marla's heart leapt into her throat. Jonah immediately sprang into action, signaling her to bring the children inside. She obeyed without hesitation, her hands steady now where they would have trembled days before. The mercenaries were coming back, and this time they were bigger, faster, stronger. But Marla no longer felt powerless. She had learned, she had grown, and she had courage in her chest that refused to be crushed. Jonah met her eyes briefly before heading out to confront the incoming threat. "Stay inside," he said firmly. Marla nodded, but she stayed close to the door, watching. She could hear the hum of the engines, the shouts, and her pulse quickened. Then she saw it, the mercenaries moving toward the house, confident, armed, ready. But she remembered what Jonah had taught her, action over fear. She grabbed a lantern and quietly moved to a vantage point, signaling silently to Jonah with small lights to indicate their positions. She was part of the defense now, not just a bystander. The battle that followed was tense and brutal. Jonah used the terrain, setting traps and drawing the mercenaries away. Marla coordinated quietly from the porch, using her alien senses to detect movements and warn him. The children, guided by her whispered instructions, stayed safe in the barn. The mercenaries underestimated her, underestimated the courage and intelligence humans could inspire, especially in someone who had learned quickly and fiercely. Hours later, the dust settled. The mercenaries had fled, beaten not by sheer force, but by cleverness, strategy, and the indomitable courage of humans united. Jonah returned, exhausted but smiling. Marla ran to him, relief and admiration flooding her chest. "We did it," she whispered. "We protected them, we protected our home." Jonah shook his head, a faint grin on his lips. "We did it together," he said. She looked at him, seeing not just a man, but the very best of humanity. Brave, selfless, and strong in ways no technology or wealth could match. As night fell, Marla held her children close, looking at the stars above. She realized that her old life, the riches, the power, the fear, had taught her nothing about courage or hope. Here, in this small human world, she had learned something greater. She had learned that bravery, love, and trust were far stronger than fear or wealth. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would never forget this lesson. The night was still, except for the soft sounds of the ranch, the gentle breathing of the children, the low hum of the wind across the fields, and the occasional call of an owl. Marla sat on the porch, holding her children close, and watched Jonah move through the barn, checking the animals one last time before he rested. She felt a warmth in her chest she had not known in years, a mix of relief, pride, and deep gratitude. She had been broken, stripped of everything she thought defined her, but here she had found something greater: courage, hope, and the heart of humanity. "Thank you," she whispered to Jonah, her voice carrying softly in the night. He looked at her, brushing sweat from his brow, and smiled. "We're family now," he said simply. Marla felt tears prick her eyes. She had never imagined being part of something so simple, so honest, so strong. Family was not defined by blood, wealth, or status. It was defined by trust, by protection, by caring for each other even when it was dangerous or hard. Jonah had shown her that. He had risked everything for strangers, and in doing so, he had shown her the best of what it meant to be human. The children stirred in their sleep, and Marla gently brushed their hair back. She realized how much they had grown in courage, too. They laughed again, played again, and even in fear they had followed her guidance. She had taught them, and they had taught her in return, that bravery could be learned, that hope could grow even in the darkest times. She thought of her past life, filled with luxury and power, and felt a strange emptiness. All that wealth had never given her this feeling. The pride in survival, the deep joy in protecting those you loved, the quiet happiness of honest work and simple trust. Jonah walked over and sat beside her, his presence calm and steady. They watched the stars together, silent for a while. Then Marla spoke, her voice steady now, carrying a new strength. "I've lost so much," she said, "but I've found something I never had before: courage, family, and people who care without expecting anything back." Jonah nodded, understanding without words. He had seen it in her eyes, the transformation from fear and loss to hope and strength. He knew she was ready to face anything the universe could throw at them, because she had learned the most important lesson. Humans did not need power to be strong. Strength came from the heart. Days passed, and life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Marla worked alongside Jonah, learning more about the land, about human ingenuity, and about patience. She laughed with the children, shared stories of her own past cautiously, and slowly allowed herself to dream again, not of wealth or status, but of safety, home, and a life built with courage. She learned to enjoy the small victories, the quiet moments, the simple smiles that meant more than any riches ever could. Then one morning, as sunlight spilled over the fields, Marla stood at the edge of the pasture, watching Jonah lead the children in feeding the animals. She felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. He had given her a second chance, not because he owed her anything, but because he saw the value of life, of kindness, of hope. She realized that humans, these simple, flawed, beautiful beings, had a strength the universe often underestimated. They could endure, protect, and rise above fear in ways no alien technology could match. And she had become part of that strength. Marla turned to Jonah, her eyes shining. "I want to stay," she said. "Here with you with them, I don't need anything else. This is enough." Jonah smiled, nodding. "Then you're home," he said. Marla felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the last remnants of her past slipping away. She had survived not by fighting with money or status, but by learning what humans could teach: courage, resilience, and the power of choosing to protect and care. As night fell again, Marla tucked her children into bed, kissed them softly, and stepped outside. Jonah was already there, watching the stars. They stood together in silence, listening to the quiet life of the ranch. Marla knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges or dangers, the bond they shared, the lessons she had learned, and the courage she had found would see them through. She had lost a world of wealth, but gained something infinitely more valuable: the heart of humanity and the strength to stand unbroken, no matter what. And for the first time in her life, Marla felt truly free.